Hello everyone and welcome to another video. So the other day I came upon a realization that it's been 3 years since COVID-19 was declared a thing, and prices in the PC market has seen a lot of changes in that time period, usually for the worse because yeah, graphics cards, CPUs, the prices are just insane because manufacturers kind of realized that we would pay for anything they charge just to get the hardware. So yeah, here we are. 3 years of overpriced hardware. I mean, this 1650, a graphics card from 2019 for 250 Aussie dollars. And that's why I've come up with a very simple brand new gaming PC for 600 USD or 900 AUD that almost anyone can build to counter this problem we have here. So as a return to basics, I will also go over the parts I chose for this PC, why I chose them, how to build this PC step by step, and finally some benchmarks to get the general idea of how this system should perform if you were to build this yourself. So without further ado, let's get into it. Starting off with the CPU, we have the Core i3-12100F. This is my favorite brand new chip for around 160 AUD. Now this is nowhere near the ideal chip with 4 cores and 8 threads, but it's super efficient and it produces super high FPS in most games. With our i3 thankfully being a 12th gen Intel chip, that means we get the latest platform as well for our budget system, which ensures upgradability for a few years to come. Now this is an H610M HDDR4 board from Gigabyte. While being nothing too special, it has enough functionality for every other part in this system and should do its job well. Now for storage, I decided to splurge a bit and get the Kingston NV2 1TB NVMe SSD. Now this is a PCIe Gen 4 drive, and with the i3 being a 12th gen chip, we get full functionality, full speeds of this incredible drive, and a lot of storage for games too. Now for the RAM, I'm just using a no-nonsense silicon power 2x8GB kit of DDR4 clocked at 3200 MHz with a CAS latency of 16. I've used this kit on the channel before and it works well, so there's not much to talk about. Now powering this system is the Thermaltake Smart BX1 650W 80+ bronze PSU. For 78 Aussie dollars, this is an amazing deal as that price is usually reserved for the 550W version of this unit, but since it went on sale, I decided that it was a no-brainer to get this one for future upgradability. Now for the most crucial part of our gaming PC, we have the ASRock Challenger D RX 6600. Now this is the best brand new graphics card you can get in terms of price to performance, and I got mine for 319 AUD. Now with support for PCIe Gen 4 and 8 gigs of VRAM, it should be able to handle any game we throw at it today. Housing our beautiful components is the Antec NX200M RGB. This is the case I've been wanting to build in for a long time, and I figured this was a perfect occasion thanks to its compactness and functionality. It's also very well priced. So the total price of all the parts is 878 AUD, which is way under budget for us today, and I'd say that's a pretty good win. So without further ado, let's get into the build, shall we? Now starting off, we'll need these 4 components: the CPU, the RAM, the SSD, and the motherboard. So we'll be starting the build with the motherboard. So get all your accessories out. We have the SATA cable, which we might need for some SATA SSD or hard drive upgrades in the future, but we're not using it here. Warranty papers, keep these around in case your system runs into any motherboard trouble. And here we have our motherboard itself. Pretty rudimentary packaging, and the I/O shield, which we'll definitely need for our case later on. So just put all your accessories back in the box and set your I/O shield to the side. Now get your motherboard out of the static bag and place it on top of the motherboard box. Now what you'll want to do is to take out the CPU and the included stock CPU cooler from the Intel box, like so. Now you just need to pull the CPU out like that in case you're confused about how the box works, and leave that to the side. Now for the cooler, it's right underneath the CPU in this encasement, so what you want to do is just open that up and pull the CPU out. So as you can see, it already has thermal paste on there, so that's why I didn't have to use any of my own paste, which is always a good thing, especially for a low-powered CPU like the i3. Now to install the CPU, you need to press down on this metal lever, slide it to the right and lift it up like so. And then you can lift the plastic cover for the CPU socket. Now take out your CPU from the plastic clamshell. Now just be very careful when pulling the chip out and try not to drop it. And now that the CPU is here, you need to pay attention to the grooves on the sides of the CPU because they line up straight up with the grooves on the socket right here and here. And with that out of the way, we can now line up our i3 with our CPU socket simply like so. Try not to break the pins as they're very important as to how the system will actually run in the first place. So close the metal / plastic cover for the CPU and push down on the metal lever. It is a bit resistant, so push as hard as you can but not too hard, and hook it up to that metal hook right there. The black plastic cover pops off like so, and we have our CPU installed. Moving on to the CPU cooler, since it already has thermal paste on the heatsink, we don't have to worry about that anymore. And to install this cooler, we have these plastic pins here. They're not on every cooler, but on the Intel stock coolers they do have them. So just line up these plastic pins with the holes on the 4 corners of the CPU socket. So make sure the pins are inside the holes, like so. Every corner has to be in, and place it down just like that. Now you need to press down on the corners, 2 at a time preferably, like so. Click. Yeah, the click sound, make sure that it's in all the way. And there we have it. The cooler is now in place. Now for the fan header, we need to connect that to a header that is called the CPU fan, CPU underscore fan specifically, and they have these plastic nubs to indicate where it should go, and just push it down like so. Yep, there we have it. The CPU cooler is completely installed, and now we can route these cables to make it look a bit neater. Now moving on to the RAM, it's pretty simple. Just unlock these brackets like so. Now there are these notches here that you'll have to line up with the notches at the bottom of the RAM stick, as you can see right here. Once you've got that settled, it's pretty simple and straightforward to install the RAM sticks. Just line them up properly like so, and press down on each side of the RAM stick until you hear a click, like that. Repeat the process for the other stick as well, like so. And that's pretty much it. Pretty simple, isn't it? Since Gigabyte doesn't want to use M.2 screws, we have this plastic pin that we have to yank out. It's pretty tough, so be careful not to hit anything when you yank it. Now with the pin out of the way, we can now install our 1TB SSD. Just line up the notch on the NVMe SSD with the slot and push it down, line it up with the screw holes and push the plastic pin back where it came from. You'll know it's in all the way once you hear a click like so. And there we have it. And that completes the first part of the build, which is the motherboard combo. Now set it aside for now and prepare the case. Now since this case has a tempered glass window, realistically you can just slide out the glass panel without having to remove any screws. But since I don't want anything in my way, I'm just going to remove the entire harness. It's optional, by the way, so just keep that in mind. With our glass panel completely removed, it is time to go to the back of the case and open up the back panel. You need to use your screwdriver for the first time, but afterwards you just need to use your thumbs, really. Now just pop that back panel open, leave it to the side like so, and turn it around. Now we have a lot of cables to route here, and these manuals and warranty papers are not necessary for now, so just put them back in the box. Now remove the bag of screws from the bunch of tied up cables. We have our necessary screws for the motherboard, the GPU, the PSU, so on and so forth, along with some zip ties. Just toss it to the side right now. The fans included in the case are already pre-routed, and so we don't have to do much about those, but since I like it a bit neater than this, I'm just going to untie everything and reorganize them. So with that out of the way, we do have our front panel connectors. So we have the power switch, power LEDs, and the hard disk drive LED all bunched up like that. The USB 3 connector, the big blue one, and the USB 2 connector, which is the tiny black one right below it. The reset switch is wired to the LED fan, so we don't have to do much about that. And there's also the HD audio connector, which we'll go into more details later on. Now, routing front panel connectors depend heavily on the case and the motherboard you're using. So for this combo specifically, I'm going to put the power switch, hard disk drive LEDs, and power LEDs on the left hole of the basement, like so. The USB 3.0 connector will go to this hole right here because that lines straight up with the USB 3 connector on the motherboard. So just push it down in there. And finally, the HD audio and USB 2 connectors. These will go to the right hole, both of them, because of the motherboard, but in the footage here I kind of messed up and split them between the two holes. It's a mistake that can easily be fixed, so just keep that in mind. Once the case cables are routed, it is time to install the power supply with these hex head screws, which either come with the case or the power supply box in some units. So here's the power supply itself. Make sure the fan is down before you install it, because that's another source of air intake that you should not block. So just slide the power supply in like so. It could get stuck by some cables, but overall it should slide in like that. Now line the screw holes on the case with the screw holes on the power supply unit in order to secure it in place with the 4 hex head screws that was previously mentioned. Just a quick note, don't forget to turn the power supply on like so when you boot up your PC for the first time. I've seen way too many people make that mistake. And with that last screw in, our power supply is officially installed. Moving on, we'll go over the PSU cables we'll be using. So starting off with this 24-pin motherboard header, it will be going behind these front panel cables in this hole right here. Just slot that through. Next up, we have the 4+4-pin CPU power connector. Now this will go to the top hole here. So just slot that through and let it be for now. Next up, we have this Molex connector, which will solely be used to power up our fans. So if you dig into this mess of cables, you'll find the Molex connector right here, which is also connected to all the fans in this specific case. Fan configurations differ from case to case, but for this one we only need to connect this Molex connector for everything to run. And once we're done with that, we'll just bunch it up and stuff it in the hard drive bay. Last but not least, we have this PCIe 8-pin cable, which will be used to power our graphics card. It's just a single 8-pin, so you don't need to do much. You just need to bundle it up, slide it through the left hole, this one right here. Just slot it through and you're done. Once you're done with this, flip the case on its head. Now take the IO shield out of its packaging and line it up with the hole in the back of the case, like this. Once the shield is lined up, you now have to press in the 4 corners of the shield. Just press it in until it clicks and the shield should be in place. And there we have it, the IO shield installed. Before installing the motherboard, I advise everyone to check if there's enough standoffs for your motherboard. Standoffs are these screw holes that are screwed straight into the case in order to hold up the motherboard. Now you don't necessarily need them all to make the motherboard or the PC work, but this is just for structural stability, more or less. In addition to that, you'll also need these UFO looking screws to actually screw in the motherboard. Motherboards usually require 6 to 9 of these screws depending on which one you're using. Our motherboard specifically requires 6 in this case, so that's how much I'll be preparing. With the preparation done, it's time to put our motherboard into the case. Now make sure the ports on the motherboard actually line up with the holes on the IO shield. This makes sure everything is aligned properly. And you can see the ports here will be used later on, so it's crucial to get it lined up right. Now once everything is lined up, there are these screw holes that you have to use your aforementioned motherboard screws. So just grab one, line the holes up properly, and just start screwing in. Repeat the process for the other 5 screws. The screw holes usually have these metal bits flaring around if you're confused as to where they are. Once the task is complete, you'll find your motherboard firmly in place. So onto the cables. We'll be starting with the 4+4-pin CPU power connector. As you can see, there's a nub on the port which lines up with the nub on the connector here. And so what you'll want to do is line them up, line the pins up, and just push it in till it clicks, like that. The same thing applies for the 24-pin connector. Just line up the nubs and they'll clip in together once you push the connector in. Like so. Moving on to our front panel connectors, we have our USB 3 connector. It looks like this, and you'll be lining it with either an USB 3.0 or 3.2 port, like so. There's a little nub poking out if you don't know which way to line up the connector. With the USB and HD audio connectors, it's pretty straightforward. The HD audio is the one with the missing pin in the middle, and it goes to this far left header that says F audio. Just line up the pins and press it in like so. Same thing applies for this USB header, which goes into the USB ports. So here there are guides for the power switch, power LEDs, and hard drive LEDs in case you were confused as to where those headers would go. So you can just follow that guideline and connect these. So a tip I have for these is just to bunch them up into a square and sort of install them like you would the other headers. Remember, the positive side goes on the left and the negative side goes on the right. As for the power switch, the polarity doesn't matter, you just need to occupy the right pins. So just follow the guidelines and press it in like so. Thankfully, we don't have the reset switch because it's being used to control the fans, so that's all she wrote for the front panel connectors. Now it's time for the most grueling part of PC building, the cable management. So usually what I do in cases with power supply basements like these is that I pull all the excess cabling from the front to the back so that they stay out of sight, and I usually just stuff them in the basement and usually route them, tie them down to sort of keep them out of sight. Your mileage may vary in terms of cable management because no configuration is the same, but yeah, it's usually not too hard to make your rig look good. Yeah, so you can just use zip ties to tie some of these cables down, keep them in place. So once the cables are properly tied down and stuffed up, you just grab the back panel and screw them in, and you're pretty much done with the toughest part of PC building. I deliberately did not use a hard drive for this exact reason, by the way, so you're welcome. Once you're done closing the back panel, just flip the PC on its back. Now it's time to unbox the beautiful RX 6600. Now this card is probably my favorite graphics card to ever release in recent years, thanks to the price and the performance it offers. I don't buy new graphics cards at all, so I rarely get to do the plastic peel, so I just wanted to catch it on film for you guys. So the back panel was pretty easy to peel, but the shroud panel, yeah, it was not that fun to peel off. Before installing the GPU, don't forget to remove the PCIe bracket covers as well. These are solid bracket covers that can be only removed through wiggling like this, because we paid for a cheaper case, so we get the cheaper option. Usually in higher end cases, they have removable covers that are highly customizable and only held by one screw. So just keep that in mind when you're buying a case. Once the bracket covers are removed, also remove this other cover that holds the GPU and potentially other PCIe devices in place. So you just need to remove this one screw right here and the whole thing should come off. Now flip the PC on its back and press down on the PCIe X16 clip, and we're ready to get our GPU installed. Remove the PCIe cover like so, and tilt it a bit to fit in the case, as this case is quite small, but it technically supports the card. So just be careful, line up the notch on the GPU with the notch on the PCIe slot. As you can see here, just the notch on the GPU, notch on PCIe slot. Like I said, tilt, slide in, line it up properly, push it in till it clicks. This USB 3 header is a bit in the way, so I'll just move it a bit to this side, and now we can push the GPU down properly. Now grab one of the hex head screws similar to the one you use for the PSU and start screwing the GPU in like so. Once that's done, reinstall the other cover for the PCIe cards that you removed earlier to finally secure everything in place. Now grab the 8-pin PCIe connector, similar to the CPU 4+4 pin power connector and the motherboard 24-pin power connector. All you need to do is line up the pins, line up the nubs, and it should click once you fully press it in. Once the connector is plugged in, you'll notice that there's another similar connector on the body of the cable. So if you don't want it dangling around, I suggest grabbing a zip tie and tying it down to the body of the cable to keep everything neat and organized. Once that's done, I'll reinstall the glass panel that I removed. This step is usually not this long if you didn't do what I did and remove the entire harness, because as you can see there are these pins here that just slide in and out. Yep, like that. So I'll just skip this step and come back to you with the finished product. Just gotta line these cylinders up properly to seal the case like so. Take care of the plastic peel in one swoop like that. And there we have it, our $600 gaming PC looking pretty damn good in my opinion. The part selection is pretty limited at this price point, but I think I chose what really works aesthetically, and I'm so happy about that. Now, time to see if it actually boots or not. Alright, moment of truth. Power button, fan spinning, keyboard cover gone. Okay. So it might take a while because it's training the memory and all sorts of things, but it should show up right about now. Okay, it's alive. It's alive. Great. Okay, before we install Windows, I just want to show you guys something here. Sorry for the shaky cam, but I'll be showing you how to enable your XMP profile. Just find a setting that says XMP, go to profile 1 for this specific RAM configuration, save and exit. The settings should be applied after a restart. And with that, we're pretty much done with our PC outside of Windows. Now Windows is actually pretty simple to install, but I didn't want to record the whole thing on camera because of how long it is. So yeah, if you guys want a separate guide for installing a free activated copy of Windows, please let me know in the comments and I'll get to work on that. So yeah, this system turned out amazing. The RGB fans turned out to be static, which is kind of a bummer, but overall it's still pretty aesthetically pleasing, and I hope we can get some real good numbers out of this thing. So without further ado, let's move on to the benchmarks, shall we? With everything done and dusted, I think it's safe to say that the system not only looks clean, but also has a lot of power under its hood. For only $600, it can play some of the latest and greatest games at 1080p, 60 FPS with high to ultra settings with no sweat at all. I hope this build is a good base for you guys to go off and build some of your own PCs with similar specs or even better than mine for better prices, because after all, that's all I want for the viewers of this channel, is that you guys find what's best for you, what kind of works in your budget, and get countless hours of gaming out of that. So that's pretty much it from me. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Like it if you enjoyed it, dislike it if you didn't, subscribe if you want to see more content like this from me, and I hope to see you all around in my next videos. Have a good day or night wherever you are, and I guess I'll catch you around.